Plan Commission meeting to order November 23rd, 2021. Roll call, please.
Anna here.
Sullivan here.
Coelho here.
Okay, the chair.
Kuzikowski here.
Oldani here. Schliepert here.
Chandler here. For the record, Alderman Lark is here, but the microphone was not working.
Okay. Carrie, we're going to go right to you with the zoning code update discussion if you want to start it.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. We do not actually have a presentation for tonight. This is simply a work session. It's your last opportunity to provide comments and to ask questions before this is brought before you for formal action. That is scheduled for the last meeting of this year, which is December 14th. We are working with HLA to incorporate all comments right now. This is a public comment period. The zoning code was posted to the website last week, and we've invited stakeholders to provide their comments either by email or on the forum online. It was also posted to the project website, and comments submitted through that website will go directly to House Levine. So again, we are not going to go code, section by section or line by line, but this is an opportunity for you to provide last minute comments, work through any issues that you may have heard from other people who've been reading the code or hearing things online. We have been getting lots of comments with regard to RV parking. Unfortunately, some of the information is not accurate, but if that's a section that is something that everybody wants to take a look at, and if you're comfortable with the way that it's written, please let me know. If you would like to see some changes to that language, now is the opportunity to discuss that as well. I had asked everybody to bring comments and questions for this meeting to facilitate the discussion, but I want to make sure that everybody is on board with the code before it gets presented for formal action. Once the Plan Commission is satisfied and recommends the approval to the Common Council, we will schedule that. It will be in January that they will take action, and that may, depending on how it goes, it may get adopted at the first meeting and it may get adopted in subsequent meetings. It just depends. So the floor is yours.
Okay. It's kind of been a long process. What distinctly stands out to me where most of the discussion was a lot on RVs, garage size, and fences.
There was a lot of discussion with regard to fences. That's correct.
So just very quickly, you don't have to go into detail. Just want to recap basically what encapsulates the new ordinance on fencing, please.
Essentially, the major change has to do with residential fences. And what was determined and incorporated into the draft of the code is that vinyl coated chain link fence would only be allowed in non-street yard rear yards for residential.
So no longer on the side. So if you had a home, for instance, on Howell or 13th, and your house is facing north, you could not have that fence on the west side.
Chain link fence will not be allowed in the street yard. So it's section 170507 specifically, if anybody's following along. Approved materials for single family fences are wood composite, stone, brick, wrought iron, aluminum, vinyl, PVC, or hedgerow. Coated chain link fence may be utilized in rear yards only. Also, they have to be of non-site barrier construction and have a minimum opacity of 50%. So this also specifies that fence materials in front yards and or exterior side yards shall only be the materials which are designed and intended for use in fence installations. Vegetation, wood composite, aluminum, vinyl, PVC, wrought iron, and other as approved by the Plan Commission. So it does still give you the discretion to approve of a specific material as brought before you that may not be in here. Also specifies that the face of the, well, it says sign, it should be side, containing posts, poles, rails, hardware, and other similar features shall be directed inward. So you want to have your nice face toward your neighbors or toward the street, and then the constructed side, if there is one, inward to the property itself. Fences are prohibited in front yards, and then we have the street-facing side yard fences. For corner lots, they shall not exceed a height of 4 feet and shall not extend into the vision clearance triangle if located on the property line. Fences in the street-facing yards of corner lots shall not exceed a height of 6 feet if located a minimum of 10 feet from the property line and improved with a landscape plan between the fence and the right-of-way.
Okay, commissioners, any questions? I know we spent quite a bit of time. I think we're on Zoom at the time for fences, but I thought it was worth reviewing.
Actually, I do have a question. What's the enforcement when that is not followed? How is that being enforced? Anybody can go up anywhere and just put a fence.
Well, right now you need a fence permit. So you need to have approved materials as part of the fence permit.
What if someone do it without even looking for a permit?
Well, that goes through the neighborhood preservation officer and the zoning administrator for enforcement process.
Well, if someone does not call it out or report it, it just can stay there, right?
Until somebody notices it. That's the way that we've addressed those issues. It's kind of the same with any violation throughout the city. It's on a complaint basis, or if we find it, we will enforce, what is the word I'm looking for? Initiate action. Okay, so we start the process to confirm that it is a violation, and if it is a violation, it goes through the usual process.
But there is no committee or anybody that goes around and check for those things just to make it doesn't violate or doesn't impact the neighborhood.
The neighborhood preservation officer will be going around and looking for specific things as per the program, and I believe that will be starting in January. She's already going around and getting familiar with the city and identifying what is considered a violation at this point. She is fielding those complaints. It is still going to be largely a complaint-based process, however.
I don't know that we're going to spend a lot of resources on going out specifically looking for fence violations. I mean, certainly if they do we come across them in the course of an investigation, we'll address those. But I mean, I think the philosophy of the whole program is to first and foremost educate and try and gain compliance on the front end, and certainly for those people, if you're putting up a fence and then pulling a permit, you'll have that information available to you. I mean, for the hopefully rare occasion where people don't get permits and we are aware of it, yes, that's something that the NPO, the neighborhood preservation officer, and the zoning administrator will pursue, but it's not something we're going to be out there specifically looking for these fence violations.
I understand what you're saying, and I kind of agree with you. It's just, and I know it just seems like, oh my gosh, it's just a fence. I have been in other neighborhoods where different kind of fences are all around, and how much it destroys the aesthetic and the value of that environment. So it does have a weighed-in consequences, not right away, not from the outlook, but it does have a big impact.
Yep.
So,
what we have going for us, I think, and I don't mean to interrupt, is that fences have always been required to obtain permits.
Yes, I know.
So at least in that regard, we're not suddenly introducing something that the city, at least we're hoping the citizens are not unaware of. So, and we are going to be looking for certain things that we currently look for. Is it placed or proposed to be placed in an easement? Is it proposed to be placed in a floodplain or a wetland? Those are still going to be things that we use as criteria. So hopefully those unpermitted fence situations will be few and far between.
Okay, thanks. That's it for me.
I have a question. Fences and the easements that they have for utilities, is there a distance or space that you have to have?
There's no specific setback to an easement. Fences are generally not allowed, with some exceptions. When they are allowed, they have to sign a waiver, meaning the landowner has to sign a waiver saying that if for any reason that fence needs to be removed, we are not, as the city, responsible for its replacement. So that's something that's in place right now. In some cases, locating a fence in an easement is not an issue as long as it's not over the infrastructure itself. But that's it's not necessarily on a case-by-case basis, but it really does depend on the easement.
So there was no definite dimension that they have to maintain or?
No.
Okay.
Typically, it's just stay outside the easement, and if you're allowed within it, then you have to sign the waiver.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else on fences? Just very quickly, refresh my memory, garage size as we got to detached and attached.
We wanted to treat garages kind of similarly. We did specify within the code what the maximum width is and the maximum width for the garage doors themselves, and then the maximum amount of facade that it can comprise. So I believe I'm trying to find that section here. I believe garage doors are limited to an overall width of 24 feet, and the attached garage itself cannot comprise more than 45% of the front facade of the building, I believe.
I think that maybe bears some additional discussion and maybe some clarification, even in my mind. I mean, when you're talking about a 24-foot maximum garage door width, are you talking about a single set of doors or the total of all garage doors on a facade?
Quite frankly, I wasn't really going there. I was going with total square footage of the garage, or percentage of what the garage is compared to the main building. But
Okay.
there was some discussion that, was it attached could be greater than or equal to?
So we
We
have.
didn't want the whole thing being garage versus
Right.
house.
So we have in it's in Article 4, so that's section 170403 sub E, with regard to single-family detached dwelling unit attached garages. So the attached garage shall be subordinate to the principal building. The maximum size of the attached garage shall not exceed 50% of the livable area of the principal building. The attached garage shall share a common wall and roof with the principal building. The attached garage shall provide internal access to the principal building. The height of the attached garage shall not exceed the height of the principal building. And single-family detached units may have garage doors located on the primary facade, but the garage door or doors shall not exceed 45% of the corresponding facade's total width. The garage door or doors shall not exceed 24 feet in width, and the garage door or doors shall be recessed from the primary front facade of the house, not including porches, bay windows, or other minor projections, a minimum of 1 foot.
Okay, I think you answered my question.
So, I mean, so that's a big deal, right? So, I mean, I'm not saying it's right, wrong, or indifferent, but it's just much different than what you're having the code right now. And that's likely to be something, and I just want to highlight it just so we're crystal clear as to what the commission wants here. I mean, under this interpretation, well, it's not interpretation, it's what it says. You cannot have, essentially you can't have a 3-car garage facing the street, right? If the maximum width of the garage doors is 24 feet, that's...
So 312s would be 36.
Yeah, so this wouldn't allow for 3-car garages facing the street. It also is very different in the sense that this requires the garage doors to be set back a minimum of 1 foot from the front of the house. So you can't have, essentially, a lot of the home sales that you see right now, which have the garages closer to the street than the front of the house, would not be allowed. It's a big change.
Yeah, that is a big change.
And also, to a similar but a little bit lesser extent, I mean, I'm sorry, you say it was 55% of the, 50%?
Or 50%
of the livable area.
No, I'm talking
45% of the facade.
So 45% a maximum of 45% of the facade can be garage doors.
Yes, can be, yes.
So think about it. And I use my house as an example because it is what it is, right? You've got the 2-car garage up in front. It's in front of the house. It probably, maybe it takes up 60% of the frontage of the house. Would not be allowed. And there's a lot of situations like that. Only bring it to your attention, just say that it is a very drastic change than what we permit right now.
Yeah, they can be very problematic because a lot of the houses, as you stated, Doug, the prominent feature out to the road is garage, and then the house is set back a little bit. I think the other thing which I guess I didn't realize, is you can't have a 3-car garage. So as you get into, primarily the homes they're building now has a 2-car garage and then that added single one with 10-foot door, 12-foot door, and then the 24. That wouldn't be allowed anymore.
Not unless it was a side entry.
Nobody's gonna build.
Well, I remember that this was a very long discussion at one of our workshops.
Yeah, I know.
And I know that
we got it wrong, I think.
there were discussions quite a bit
I think so.
about the percentage that would be allowed and how we would require the access to that attached garage. I am not opposed to saying that you do not have to be 1 foot behind the front facade of the building. I think being flush is probably very fine. I think what this was intended to do was to put the house as the primary structure in front of, or at least be the dominant feature of the single-family residential lot, meaning the garage is not the principal structure. The garage is not set forward from the house. If that's not something that the Plan Commission wishes to proceed with, then we can take it out. But I think having an attached garage that is flush with the front facade of the building is probably fine.
So in my case, I'm in a ranch, granted it's an older ranch, but the garage probably exceeds the front face from the front door by 5 to 6 feet, which you could no longer do.
Under this, correct.
Wow. That would eliminate a whole lot of home building models.
Yeah, I don't know too many houses where the garage isn't set in front of it. There is flushes when you talk about colonials.
Yeah, colonial.
Ranches especially.
I have seen ones that are flush with the building, or if you talk about a split level, then those are obviously in line with the front facade of the building. I think what has been commonplace since probably the 80s and 90s have been these garages that stick out from the front of the house, and that's just become commonplace. It's become, more what people see, more what people are used to. And I think what this is trying to get at is the house is the principal structure. The garage is not. I think I made this comment before. It's to kind of reinforce the concept people live here. Bring the house to the street, because that's what the traditional neighborhood is. It's the walking area that has the house toward the street, the porch toward the street, not the garage. Cars don't live here, people live here. That's a philosophy. If the Plan Commission doesn't agree with that, well, we can take it out.
Oh, I don't disagree with that philosophy. I just, from a standard build, because they usually put a room behind the garage. In a typical build, a garage is 24 feet deep or whatever it is. They stick a room or something behind it in the building. Boy, I think that could deter a lot of home builders just because they have base models. Just a 3-car garage just exceeding 24. How much is it on?
Garage doors shall not exceed 24 feet in width or 45% of the facade total width.
But so would you be allowed to have that 24-foot garage door and then that little side 1-car?
As long as you don't exceed the 45% of the facade total width and you don't exceed 50% of the livable area of the dwelling.
And you don't exceed the face of the house.
Right.
I think it's fine, but we need to be very clear about that if that's the intent, because right now it's not, even when we're reading the code, it's not really clear. It says 24-foot maximum. Is that, again, per set of doors or all the doors?
Right, and I think that's what's throwing me a little bit. Maybe I'm just a little thick tonight.
No, if it's not clear to the Plan Commission, it's not going to be clear to anybody else. So I'm looking to the Commission for how to make this
Because if I was a home builder and I read that, none of my, at least the models I'm seeing, and I'll go to my neighborhood like the homes in Glen Crossing, none of them would be approved.
And I used to live on Oakwood Lake, had 2 homes that we built on Oakwood Lake, and we couldn't have sheds, so we all had 4-car garages. I mean, that was just how we hid all the lake toys. And so, and because we were on the lake, all of our views, we weren't going to put the garage in the back. You know, the garage was so up front so that all the views of the lake were, of course, in the living space behind. So I'm not sure any of those houses would, they're all with the, you know, with the garages up front.
So what I'm hearing is we are not concerned with the garage being in front of the primary facade of the building. But is there a maximum that you want to specify rather than having a minimum setback? Or not necessarily rather than a minimum setback, but rather than having the garage set back from the front facade of the house? Do you want to allow for projections up to 6 feet in front of the primary facade, for instance?
Well, I think it depends. So, like, don't just set, every situation is different. Not everybody has a lake view that they can have to, for a reason, to have it up front to store their lake toys or whatever. So I think we should have like a general statement. Every situation is different. You cannot just generalize it for every single one of them.
We have to have a standard to apply for everybody, though. We can't just have a generalization. It's either you have a set of standards that you apply to everybody, or you have, you know, standards that are specific to X, Y, and Z.
I understand what you're saying. What I'm saying is you cannot just say 6 foot from the front of the driveway or from the easement of the right of way. You can just say that, but what if the location is within a residential neighborhood?
That's what we're talking about. We're specifically talking about single family detached right now.
What is it facing, the actual roadway or a local neighborhood roadway? It depends.
It doesn't matter. You're facing the street.
I would think standard is 6 to 8 feet.
That's what
Now,
I
my
know.
neighbor has a really odd deal where his probably sticks out 10, but he built it like super deep and weird. But anyway, oh, sorry,
We
I'm
were
on
on
record here.
On a circle driveway, so the whole 4-car garage was in front of the house. You know, because it went in a circle, so the house would have, you know, the garage.
The
went
side of
this
the
way.
garage was the front of the house.
Yeah, so that would have been totally.
So, I mean, as a philosophy, I totally agree with that, that we want the house to be front and center and not, you know, here's the 3 or 4 car garage and, you know, that's all you see from the street. But in terms of practicality, knowing what the market is, or at least what it has been, and knowing kind of the number of models, there are models out there that will work. There are.
Yeah.
It's just that's probably the bulk of what people are used to buying and making choices on has that garage front and center. So, you know, I'm not saying throw it out. I'm just saying, I mean, carefully consider what that means, like you said, to people who are looking to build homes in the city of Oak Creek. And maybe it does mean something like maybe what we're trying to avoid is just having the garage, you know, 24 feet sticking out in front of the house.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. So, I mean, Carrie asked for a distance and it's bad reference, but I'm referencing my house and I don't even know what it sticks out, but I'm thinking it's about 6-7 foot. Maybe from my stoop to my door, maybe 6.
Well, keep in mind too that the garage, as part of the principal structure, and even as a detached structure, would still have to meet minimum front setback requirements. So, in every single residential district, you're still going to have to be at least 25 to 30 feet from the street or from your front yard.
Understood.
So, just keep that in mind that if there's going to be a maximum distance in front of the house that we apply this, you're still going to be pushing something further back.
So if we're trying to avoid the situations where the entire garage is sticking out in front of the house, and that's typically going to be at least, probably 20 foot depth, at least. I know there's some that are bigger than that. So, ideally, you'd probably want something that's less than 20 feet. Maybe as we put that back to the consultant, maybe that's 10, maybe that's 6, but we just don't want to have the house and then, let's add the garage up in front of that, which is, it's sticking out 20 feet. And that's all you see from the road.
Yeah. I'm thinking my neighbor's house is a tri-level. And I bet you theirs sticks out in the front of the house. I bet you they're 10 to 15.
I mean, we can bring you back examples of builders' models that are out there, and you'll see that I mean, there's a variety of different ways that these either don't fit or
guess-
that actually do.
I guess from my point of view, I don't want to make it so restrictive that it's unattractive for people to want to build here.
So-
I definitely want the standard as you stated, but we don't want to make it so restrictive that you find your dream house in your dream community and then you find out you can't build it.
So I don't want to, we have very limited time and I don't want to, I don't want to stifle the discussion, but I want to make sure that we have time for any other comments and questions moving forward. What I'm hearing is eliminate the requirement to set the attached garage back a foot. Clarify how wide the garage doors can be. Is it each individual door that can be 24 feet? As long as you don't exceed the 45 feet of the primary facade width, can you have two, whatever. Clarify that. Now, the other part of this is the location. Now, do you want to do like a maximum of 10 feet in front of the primary facade or something like that? And I can get our consultant to provide some language with regard to that, but they're going to be looking for what's going to be acceptable to the commission. And also, I want to make sure that we are going to be incorporating language that you're familiar with, that you're comfortable with for the 14th, because if this discussion keeps going at a time when you're going to be considering it for adoption, it's going to push the adoption period. And I don't want to make that sound more dire than it is or make it, more concerning than it is, just that you're aware that we want to make sure that we incorporate everybody's comments and everybody's comfortable with it so that we're not presenting you with something that you're going to be changing on the fly at the time that you're asking to be considering it for adoption.
Right. So, boy, I don't want to.
I think we would need to know with builders, somebody mentioned maybe talking to some builders, maybe some builders now, and their base models, what's the average depth, or I should say the offset of the garage from, if we sit here right now and say no more than 6 feet, a builder might say, we don't have anything that's 6 feet or less. Everything's 8 feet or 10 feet. I think if we could have some guidance, we don't want somebody coming in here and immediately having half the base models of their builder wiped off because of this, So I think we need to know what's an average setback of a house, the offset of a house.
I'm sorry, we did put it out to one builder that we've been working with, did not get anything back. And, I know that they're busy and, that's been kind of a common theme. We've sent out the sign portions of the sign code to certain people and we've not got comments back. And that's been our concern all along is that, when we do finally adopt a code, we want it to be something that's workable and not the first, when people see that, well, I didn't mean that, or I didn't want that. So I don't want to throw, lob bombs here with this house thing, but I see that as a real concern.
We typically, though, lay back, have a 30-foot setback off the sidewalk from the house or the garage. And we like our neighborhoods kind of in line so we don't have a house sitting 60 feet back and one 30-foot off. That becomes a concern too, correct? I mean, we don't want our neighborhoods all...
We do have lot averaging.
Yeah,
that's what that is.
Is that what that's called?
Yeah, it's called lot averaging, so that, if somebody comes in and they're in between, multiple houses, yes, it's a minimum setback, and you're not going to catch everybody.
Right.
Somebody's going to cite their house 80 feet back when the minimum is 25. They have that.
I get it, but in a subdivision lot,
subdivisions are probably going to be a little bit more
crossing
regulated.
out there where, each lot is 180 deep and they're back to back. I mean, somebody ain't going to push your house back 100 feet. And
not typically, no. Not typically. There are some people
would we
who
even
do.
allow it? Or do we want them in line? Or do we want a house, everything 30 foot off and one sitting another 50 foot back?
That's something that's up to the community as well. But we do have lot averaging right now. But in those cases, sometimes it will push the houses back or allow them to push the houses back farther than the rest of them as well. It just depends on how many houses are on the block right now. It is a minimum. You can define a maximum if you really want, but I think that's more limiting.
if we could go back to the 3 and 4 car garages, I just want to make sure that there's language in there that still allows it, from my perspective.
Well, I think it just depends on how big of a house you're building. What we're trying to avoid is the 4-car garage for the 900 square foot ranch home.
Right.
It's disproportionate, and then you get into a situation of what's actually the principal building.
Yeah.
So I think we can still get there, and I think we can still allow for 3-4-car garages as they pertain to the house itself. And keep in mind, this is only attached that we're talking about right now. Detached is in a different section. But I think that if we want to, I'm hearing what we're saying about getting information from the professionals, but as Doug said, we can get house models that comply with this. We can get house models that don't comply with this.
I guess from staff's perspective, do you think we have it right now, or do we need to tweak it? Are we being too restrictive and it'll curb home builders from coming in because it's too stringent and doesn't work for their base models, as Don said?
I think that you're going to get a handful of either, and I think that definitely taking off the setback from the front facade is a good move. But I do think you should specify a maximum that the garage can be in front of the principal.
Okay, I do agree with you. It's just, I don't think I have that kind of knowledge to just pull a number out of the air and say it's right, like 15 foot. Because I'm picturing my neighbor's house and the way his garage is constructed. I think it's a nice looking home. It's far more than that 5-6 foot on my home. And then I look at my neighbor across the way who really extended his garage. Yeah. Again, I think that might be a little too long, although I don't know how long it is.
And I can just tell you from my perspective, I live in an older neighborhood. All the houses on my block are built in the 50s. Most of them have detached garages that are set far back, or at least 15 feet back from the principal. And the only garages that are up front are attached, and they're in line with the principal structure. So it's not that you can't do it. It's not that it's uncommon. It's just that somewhere in the 80s and 90s, I would argue, is when the garage in front of the house became more popular.
Yeah, I will give you that as well. I grew up in a neighborhood built about the time frame of the 50s and 60s, and most of the ranch homes were that way. So,
yeah, and I can't sit here and tell you that I know exactly what the correct number is to put in here either, but I do think that we should have a range. If I go to our consultant and I say this is a concern, but we want to make sure that we're not going to allow the full depth of the garage to be in front of the house, we're probably going to get, well, what's going to be acceptable? What if we said, and this is probably not even getting very good in terms of depth, what if we said half a car length in front?
So are we talking about a half a car length of a 70 Cadillac, or a
specify the boat? You could specify the boat. I'm thinking, what I'm trying to get at here is I'm thinking that no more than 10 feet is probably going to be what the acceptable range is.
I was
but if we're going to go farther than that, I want to be able to give her something to go off of.
Okay,
I was thinking like half of the standard depth of the garage. Right. That's what if it's 20 feet, then 10. If it's 24 feet, then 12.
That's a good standard. Maybe that's just what we have her put in there. Half the depth of the garage. The only problem is if you then get somebody who's very creative and wants to have an incredibly deep garage.
Yes.
They still have to meet the setback, but that might put them 20 feet in front of the house. I'm not saying that's going to happen.
And that's kind of what my neighbor did. He didn't go wide. He can probably pull 2 cars in end to end in his garage. And then he kept the 30 off the sidewalk, but it just extends out.
You could do half the depth of the garage up to a maximum.
I think you're right. I mean, everyone's going to be able to get creative. I mean, I've seen 2.5 car garages. We've got additional depth kind of wrapping around another room.
Yeah.
And you're right. Some people have double depth garages, which is fine. But I think as a standard, if a typical garage depth, our parking stall is 9 by 18, say 9 by 20, 10 feet, if we're trying to deter or otherwise discourage having full garage depths in front of the house, I think 10 feet's a way of doing that. And might I suggest, since this is going to have to come back before you and the council. Anyway, I want to show you examples of what that is.
I have a question, actually. Why can't you go back to your consultant and ask them to go out and do some research? Meaning they can go to other communities, finding something similar to what we're looking at or what we desire, and they can come back with a couple of examples, even with pictures and stuff that we can take a look at. And from just the investigation and the research they have done, we can be able to effectively come back and tell you, instead of us sitting and guessing, yes, maybe this, maybe that.
Yes, we can do that. And I will say that, not to discount what they've done. They have done some research, and that's probably why they came up with this particular one. This is where a lot of communities are going with their codes for garages. But I hear what you're saying. If we come back with these examples, though, I don't want to be presenting new information for consideration while you're trying to adopt the code.
Correct. Yeah, we're a little bit on a time constraint here.
I just have one quick question too. I looked up some of the newer model homes, and I don't know how the 10-foot or whatever the distance would affect either a ranch or a 2-story home where it's an L-shaped and the garage entrance is, you're going in to the side, it's not facing the street. Well, that would make a 2-car garage depth stick out in front of the house.
Not necessarily. I've seen side entry garages that are actually set back from the front plane of the house, oddly. I honestly have to say that I've seen more side entry garages. Now, maybe this isn't exactly what you're saying, but I've seen side entry garages that are in line with the front facade more often than not. That's not to say that your example doesn't happen, but it would still have to be, if we're going to set a maximum, it would still have to meet that maximum.
Okay.
Garages?
What's that?
Are we good with that?
Yeah, I think we're good with garages. I think Don's suggestion was pretty good. And I mean, we're not going to get it perfect, but we do got to give you some direction. Hopefully we gave you enough. Sorry about that.
That's okay. What I will do is I will have the consultant give us some examples and give us some language. I will circulate that by email for consideration. Keep in mind that anything that gets circulated and responded to by email is subject to open records. So if you're going to be commenting on that, just make that clear. We will have something for your consideration included for the next time. If that is when you are going to be asked to adopt or recommend for adoption the code, we'll make it specific what the language is for your consideration. Meaning that'll be a highlight.
Okay, so we did fences, garages, anything else we went over the past?
Can I just quickly bring up something too?
Yeah,
it seems like the way the code is written right now, it also would possibly allow RV parking, like the RV garages. We don't seem to have a height for the garage door.
It actually does. It says that it cannot exceed the height of the principal building. So your garage cannot be taller than your house.
But if you have a 2-story house.
If you have a 2-story house, then your roof line can be in line. Now, that's not to say that it wouldn't have to comply with the same kind of design standards, meaning it shouldn't look odd. It should all look like it's part of one continuous structure.
I get where Lori's coming from is the height of the garage door. So we don't have.
Oh, the height of the garage door. I understand what you're saying.
So you don't have a 16-foot door.
Yeah.
An industrial looking door on a
We
residence.
get a lot of requests for them lately. It seems to be a growing trend, especially with detached garages. So, in fact, I did just process a permit and denied it because that's what they were requesting, a attached garage matching the height of the roof. And they wanted it to put RVs in there. So.
Are there any other sections that you would like to discuss? Any other questions that you might have?
I do have a question about the screening for the trash and recycling.
Okay. Chauncey, can you reference the section that you're looking at, please?
I want to say page 100.
Each article has their own page number.
Yes, but there's a total page at the bottom.
Not on my section.
Let's see, hold on. Let me get you a section. One moment. Section 17.0506.
Yes.
Okay. Just a quick question. I know we've had many discussions about the screening that we're trying to transition to non-flammable materials. Do we need to put that in here?
Sorry, while Carrie's researching that.
Yeah.
I think that the point, and I think, sorry, Alderman Lorik, I didn't really pick up on that. But what you're saying is that even though it's a side entry garage, it's kind of through a court in front of the house. So, and I
This is
don't,
what we're looking at, guys.
I'm not particularly referencing any section in the new code, but if it's a side entry garage, I would, at least from my perspective, say that that'd be okay.
I would say yes, because that side of the garage would actually be the front of the house.
Right. Technically, the garage is in front of the house, but it's not forward facing.
So what this says for the screening is that trash and recycling receptacles shall be screened on 3 sides with an opaque masonry wall or fence. So it specifies that it has to be made out of masonry.
Oh, okay. Okay. And then my next question, my apologies, I don't have the section. I only had the page number. The section is in regards to signage. Okay. So wherever this section is, the first item says you can have a maximum of 2 signs in your yard. This is for residents.
Yep.
And then 2 lines down, it says you can have an additional 2 signs during elections. So I just want to make sure that's a total of 4 signs.
Yes.
Okay.
You are allowed in a residential district to, under this code, have 2 temporary signs, but during election cycles, you're allowed to have 2 more.
Okay.
As long as they meet the size requirements or limitations.
There's a deadline that those need to be taken down by?
48 hours post-election. I would be very, very cautious on that 48 hours, though. We're going to be doing our best, but 48 hours is something that we have to establish in the code. Whether or not somebody has them up for, an extra day or so.
And I wouldn't necessarily characterize it as election signs because we can't. It's content neutral. It's each house, each residential home lot is allowed to have 2 temporary signs. If they choose to keep 2 election signs up, that's fine. And we're not going to regulate what that sign says aside from something that's, threatening or obscene or things of that nature.
That we do specify if it's vulgar.
Yes, there are provisions in here that state that they cannot be of that type of material. The additional 2 yard signs hints at election, meaning you are allowed to put up 2 additional signs during an election cycle. But Doug is correct, we cannot regulate content. So if you put up 4 signs in your yard during an election cycle, but they're not related to elections, oh well.
Any other discussion on any other sections? Yeah.
Wetland setbacks, they're not discussed
Yes, they are in process, and we do need to include the best management practices for the 30% open space. Thank you for reminding me. So what we had been talking about at a staff level is specifying a wetland setback, just a general wetland setback, which is going to be a little bit easier for people to understand, which is, I think we're proposing 15 feet, 5 of which would be undisturbed. What that allows is for grading and such things around buildings to kind of extend into the buffer area, but would still have that protection for the wetlands themselves. There are still going to be wetland setbacks based on the type. So, for instance, if there is a wetland that is that is delineated, that is in the code that requires a 50-foot protection buffer, there would still be regulations with regard to what they can and cannot do in that buffer, but we're saying that this would be a general buffer. That language is forthcoming. It's being crafted as we speak. The other piece of code that is being drafted as we speak, there's still going to be a minimum open space requirement of 30%. What we're going to incorporate, though, are essentially a minimum and a floor that allows for some flexibility in between. So if there is, for instance, a project that cannot meet the 30% rule, and they're asking for a reduction, there are going to be specific items for which that they can request a modification up to a maximum. And that's called, we're going to be incorporating best management practices. So if you have 25% open space and green space, and then you want to have 5%, and this is just numbers throwing out here, this is not what we're proposing. If you want to have 5% as incorporating pervious pavers, that may count toward it, and then you would be in compliance. So that's what we're crafting right now. I get it.
Like that, Matt?
Carrie wasn't here today, but we discussed this internally also. We agree with the principle on that. It's how do we ensure that it's maintained, and how do we quantify that? Now, with that being said, it's a good thought and good process because we've had a lot of discussions on it. It's the enforcement in the future. Now, if we just leave it in as is, and as they come forward to us, we could have a blanket statement of, how do we say for the landscaping? If they don't meet something,
Violation.
Well, not a violation, but we allow them to compensate.
So what?
Yeah,
I
not
think
a restitution. It'd be more of a compensation if you can't make the 30%. Well, engineering would allow,
a modification
request and stuff like that.
I think what's going to be crafted in here is going to be something that the Plan Commission would be reviewing anyway. Mm-hmm. So the 30% open space requirement applies to commercial and manufacturing and multifamily residential at this point. All of those site plans and landscaping plans have to come before the Plan Commission for approval anyway. The requirement for maintenance of all of that is going to be the same for compliance with maintenance of your landscape plan and for any other plans that you've proposed. If there's going to be a change proposed, it would have to go back to the Plan Commission if it doesn't meet the administrative modification criteria. So I hear what you're saying, but I think that there are ways that we can ensure that there is maintenance of those modification requests. And we are at 5:56. If you want to take a break before our next meeting begins, now's the time. If you think of something between now and, let's say, next Friday, please email me so that we can have adequate time to incorporate your comments into the draft that will be for your consideration. Thank you so much for your input. We'll see what we can do to get everybody's comments included.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Guzikowski, second.
Roll call.
Anna, aye.
Sullivan, aye.
Real aye.
Clark, aye.
Kevich, aye.
Guzikowski, aye.
Voldani, aye.
Sleeper, aye.
Pam Blair, aye.
Okay, see you in minutes.